Back with the market right here on 80 now and lying absolutely quiet just on the sidelines, circling around the 15,850 level. Marginally in the green, better today for the broader markets. Pfizer holding up 7%, Piramal Enterprises up 4.5%, Jubilant Foodworks, Hindalco and PVR is the one which is seeing mighty excitement, holding up 3% as we speak right now. But let's take stock of what's happening with the situation in monsoon. While, of course, it's been pouring a lot in the city of Mumbai or state of Maharashtra, but let's understand what's really happening across the country and how the trends really looking like. Dr Sachchidanand Shukla, Chief Economist at Mahindra & Mahindra, and Dr D S Pai, the Head Office of Climate Research and Services at the Indian Met Department, both join in on the show right now. Gentlemen, morning. Mr. Pai, if I could start off with you, just help us understand what's really been the countrywide breakup and progress of monsoon so far. Because, we typically tend to get a little myopic and look at states like Maharashtra where we currently at. But what's happening across the country and especially the northern region of the country?
Morning. Actually, after June second half, rainfall was monsoon weakened, and in the northern part rainfall was very less. However, monsoon revived in the second half of almost, you can say, after 20 to 30 days after weak conditions, and thereafter we had a very good rainfall activity, particularly over central India, and even in northwest India and northern part also we had some rainfall activity. As of now, country as a whole, the rainfall up to 26th July, that is up to yesterday, it is 99% of the long period average. And Northwest India, it is 89%. That means there is a deficiency of 11%. And East and Northeast India, which have got the highest deficiency, it is 83% of the long period average, which means 17% of deficiency. And Central India, which till last week there was deficiency of 10%. Now it has gone to 3% above normal. And Southern Peninsula, consistently last 2 months we have been getting very good rainfall and 26% above normal. So overall, you see that except East and Northeast India, rainfall conditions are very good.
We seem to have snapped Mr. Pai's line. We'll just get back to him in a bit. But he made his point about the geographical breakup of monsoon across the country. Mr. Shukla, if I could get you in, given that some of the northeastern states as well as some of the northern parts of the country have seen deficient rainfall, what is the impact on agriculture and the concentration, as well as how badly do you see it really impacting rural incomes? Because it's a bit of a double whammy. It's not just monsoon, but we're also dealing with COVID.
Right. So just to translate what Mr. Pai was talking about, I think while the cumulative rainfall is just about 1% below normal now, 398 millimeter versus 404 millimeter, which is the long period average. If I were to look at it in terms of distribution, the key agri states of central and northern region, right? So Punjab, UP, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, these have received close to normal rainfall. And also, if I were to look at it in terms of agri crops, so the rice belts have received adequate water. A large part of the cash crop belt, however, has received slightly irregular rainfall, which means Gujarat, which is, say, largely cotton and groundnut crops, and Rajasthan, which is largely coarse cereals, right? That state also has received slightly deficient rainfall. But if you look at the southern part now, again translating what Mr. Pai spoke about in terms of regional distribution, the southern states which contribute pulses and oilseeds, etc., they have received surplus rainfall. Now, I think we must bear in mind that it is too early to judge the monsoon or really start worrying about it. For example, in 2018, June rainfall was close to normal, but season ended with a deficit of 9% from a long period average. If I talk about 2019, June ended with a 30% deficit rainfall, but the season ended with a 10% surplus. So I think if we look at the monsoon distribution, in terms of the key crops, like I said, the rice belt and the cash crop belt, I think we'll be able to arrive at a better judgment. But having said that, again, I think it is too early. A fortnight of rainfall, there is a large fluctuation of volatility in rainfall as we have seen this year. We started off with a 10% surplus, and now we are, say, a deficit of -1. So I think we should be looking very closely how the monsoon really pans out in terms of regional distribution. So the spatial and temporal distribution, as we call it, is something to be really looked at carefully. Kharif acreage has lagged, and that is understandable because the rainfall has been erratic, right? So 68% of the Kharif area has been sown, which is, say, 8 or 9% lower than the long period average or 5-year average. So I think we still need to wait and watch in terms of the distribution, and also how the government, say, spending, and also you mentioned COVID, how do the state restrictions really pan out? I think that also will determine the cash flows going. Back to you.
Understand the historical comparison which we do, which is good rainfall means better crops, low inflation. It's a very simple textbook kind of in terminology which both of us have read in our textbooks, which is more rainfall means more crop output means less inflation. How does that equation change this year?
To answer that question, I think we must take into cognizance the fact that we are still having close to 40,000 cases. We are still having several states having to extend the corona-related or the COVID-related restrictions. With that, I think the simplistic 1:1 analogy may not really work. The relationship may not really hold, simply because there could be some supply hiccups. It could be in a particular region, it could be in a particular state. And as you know, Nikunj, I think in India, we have a huge problem of skew, right? So, for example, one district really holds the nation, has the whole nation in stranglehold when it comes to onions, and similarly for other crops. So I think one hiccup, one supply side issue in a particular state, in a particular crop, can really lead to bigger problems on inflation. So I think that 1:1 relationship, while is intuitive, it may not necessarily hold, and we need to take into cognizance the contextual reality of the moment. As we speak, there are several states under COVID restrictions. The rainfall has been erratic, and therefore there could be some supply related issues, and therefore we need to watch out this space very carefully.
Mr. Pai, progressively, if you look at the monsoon, how is this year's so-called patchy monsoon or this delayed monsoon different from last 3 or 4 years?
See, this year you might have seen that up by around middle of June itself, monsoon had reached almost up to northern part, leaving some part of northwestern part. But there was thereafter actually monsoon got weakened, and it restricted mainly over southern peninsula, or you can say peninsular region up to Maharashtra. But last 2 years, if you have seen that by almost end of June, so it was not very fast initially, but progressively by end of June itself, monsoon covered. And even in the last 2 years also, we had seen that in the second half getting more rainfall. And in recent years, another important aspect has been that whenever you get a rain, you get rain in a few days together, large amount, and then long period of dry period. This has been now, have characteristic of monsoon. Many people associate that with climate change, etc. So we have to live with such situation. It will become more and more this type of situation has to be faced.
Given what Mr. Pai is saying in terms of his prognosis for the monsoons going forward, now the country had released its advance estimates, I think, a few months ago, and they had said that, look, it's going to be another year of bumper production, record high wheat, pulses, rice, etc. Given the fact that so far, we've seen in some parts the monsoons being deficient. In fact, I think we have data which says almost 34% of the districts have seen, less rain. And then, of course, a few 16% where they've seen an excess rainfall. Do you think we'll meet these estimates, or do you think it's too early to say that as well? Because I understand sowing season has already begun. It kickstarts from the 1st of July.
So I think
you can see that.
Sorry.
Yeah, is it to me or the question was to me?
Mr. Shukla.
Yeah, sorry. Shukla, sir.
Okay, so I think if you look at the backdrop, the Rabi season ended with a record production of food grains at about 157 million tons, right, which was higher by 4%. Horticulture again was a record 327 million tons. Now this was followed by record procurement of the Rabi crops. As you know, by end June, the procurement was about 17% higher than last year, which means there is a bit of cash in the hands of farmers. And also, DBT has been activated in certain states, Punjab and Haryana, which means they've bypassed the bicholia, as we call them. And therefore, cash flow during the land preparation of the Kharif stage has been there. And therefore, I think given the situation we are in, given the kind of fluctuations or the erraticity that we have seen in rainfall, it might be a bit early to judge that, but I do believe, given the forecast, I saw a forecast from a South Korean agency saying that August and September rainfalls should be normal, and this ties in with the IMD and the SkyMet forecast as well. I have no doubt that we should be able to achieve the output targets. Now, when I say we will be able to achieve the output targets as, say, forecast by government agencies, we also need to be very careful in interpreting what will be the cash flow impact. And therefore, I would just want to take you back to what I said a bit earlier. We need to see the rainfall distribution between areas which produce cereals versus cash crops. And I think that is something that we'll have to closely monitor going forward, apart from the regional distribution of rainfall. And that will determine the eventual cash flow and the GVA impact that we closely monitor from agri perspective. Back to you.
Now, what's interesting, Mr. Shukla, is that last year, I suppose we didn't have as much demand, obviously, because the Horeca segment was shut, and that's a key consumer of soy and other products. This year, and the hope is really that the Horeca segment will be a little more active compared to the last year. Do you think that kind of inflation scare that we had seen, particularly in vegetable oils, particularly in pulses, in the beginning of 2021, do you think that could perhaps resurface in the second half of this year or perhaps early next year?
Scare that we battle every single year. Like I mentioned, a little bit of hiccup on one particular, vegetable or fruit or component of the food inflation can really lead to impact on even the nominal headline inflation number. This is a scare that we battle every single year. Having said that, I think the government is cognizant. If you look at what the RBI said at the last policy meeting, and they really put the ball into the government's court. They mentioned there has to be some supply side intervention from the fiscal authorities. And what came out of that was we saw a fertilizer subsidy of 15,000 crore being released. We also saw intervention on the oil seeds, right? There were duty rejects done. So I think given that the situation is fluid, and if the government really puts its act together, it acts proactively on some of these key bottlenecks. So if it acts on debottlenecking or taking proactive policy measures, whether it is import duties or whether it is some other supply side measure, I think we should be able to tide over this, provided the distribution of rainfall, like I said, in areas where we have cereals versus cash crops is largely normal or neutral.
All right, Mr. Pai as well as Mr. Shukla, really appreciate you both joining us and giving us your time today on ET Now.
Thank you.
Okay, well, unfortunately, there are seasons when we see onion prices make us cry. There are pockets sometimes when we see vegetable oil prices and pulses too giving us a bit of a scare. Let's see how the monsoons progress and how, India's food production pans out. For now, we'll take a very short break. Be right back with our Chartbuster segment with Kunal and Naresh.